Hello, friends. This is the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby. The goal of the AlphaList podcast is to empower CTOs with the info and insight they need to make the best decisions for their company. We do this by hosting top thought leaders and picking their brains for insights into technical leadership and tech trends. If you believe in the power of accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Plus, if you're an experienced CTO, you will love the discussion happening in our Slack space where over 600 CTOs are sharing insights, or visit one of our events. Just go to alphalist.com to apply. Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby. And today I have a very special guest. We already had once. And this time the podcast is recorded in a camper van at my conference, OMR. And it's kind of sweaty in here, so you might hear the ventilator in the background. My guest today is Mikko Hypponen. And Mikko, maybe you wanna take the introduction because I'm pretty bad at that. And I just saw so many things on your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. I rarely log into LinkedIn, so I'm sure it's out of date. But nevertheless, thanks for having me. And indeed, my name is Mikko. This is my year number 31 working in cybersecurity. And all this time, I've been trying to do the one and the same thing, trying to protect users' cybersecurity and cyber privacy. And I guess things have changed over and over again every couple of years throughout these 31 years.
And you actually did a lot of things. You just wrote a book, I think.
I did, yeah. Actually coming out in English in August 2022. So if anybody's interested in what I did during the pandemic, you can order it from Wiley. It's on Amazon.com already.
So, and it's about what?
The book is titled, If It's Smart, It's Vulnerable. And that's the Hypponen law. That's what I happened to say a couple of years ago, and it stuck. The idea being that when we add functionality and connectivity to everyday devices, they become smart devices, but they also become vulnerable devices.
So people killing smart toaster and stuff like that.
Right. It's all in there. Although the book is not just about IoT. It's actually a collection of like technical details of the trends around us and then stories. I actually worked extensively with my publisher to make the book accessible to everybody. So it's anecdotes and stories and then content. So it's an easy read. I'm quite happy with the end result.
Okay, I'll read it. And you're also in the advisory board of Europol, is that correct?
Oh, I've been many years indeed. It's very, very unique position. Gives the kind of visibility that it's hard to get any other way. And there's quite a remarkable amount of cooperation nowadays between law enforcement agencies. Europol is basically the post office between European law enforcement agencies. They don't do policing by themselves, but they cooperate and coordinate the local law enforcement. And that's today, when we live in a world which has no borders, that's exactly what we need.
And what was the craziest thing you saw there? Can you talk about that, or is that like?
There's things I can't say, but let me put it like this: the craziest things I've seen related to that particular role is that they have a surprisingly effective and power-hungry way to crack passwords whenever they confiscate computers belonging to criminals. When they do that, they might be consuming a huge amount of electricity. And that's the kind of functionality not many people are aware is even being done in Europol.
Okay, so it's basically supercomputing then? Or?
I didn't say that.
And not quantum computing?
I did not say that either. But thanks for asking.
But what will happen when we have like the first quantum computers ready?
Right, quantum. Well, there's actually a very interesting startup that I've been watching called IQM. Most of the quantum computing is being done with IBM and Google and the big boys. But there's a couple of interesting startups, and it might just be that after all this hype and waiting forever and always seeming that it's never going to happen, it might just be getting closer. And the question, how will our security systems recover when many of the traditional encryption algorithms break down, is one of the crucial questions. There was actually a talk at Black Hat in Vegas maybe 6 years ago. There was a guy just going through like, okay, if it would break tomorrow, let's say HTTPS, TSL, and the encryption algorithms we use for transportation security would break tomorrow, how would we recover? How would we rebuild trust? Who would call who? How would we establish new routes for CAs? Really fascinating way of thinking about it. And I guess one interesting detail about quantum computing and quantum proof encryption is that we already have a couple of solutions which are safe from quantum computing. One of them, maybe surprisingly, is Bitcoin. If you always use a new address for every transaction, Bitcoin is quantum proof. So Satoshi Nakamoto was already thinking about quantum in 2008 when he wrote the paper, and that's pretty remarkable.
But like, wouldn't it happen that like you basically calculate every Bitcoin that is available, like to the limit that is set, whenever quantum is cracked, or is that not happening?
No, you can't accelerate the rate of mining. It's hard coded in the original algorithm, so it will still take. I mean, 90% of the bitcoins have been mined already, but it will take 100 years to mine the last 10%.
Okay, and like stepping back to HTTPS, I mean, didn't we already see what will happen when we had Heartbleed and the Log4j issue and stuff like that? I mean, isn't that like in a way lightweight preparation for quantum being around?
No, that's a different kind of breakdown. Very important and very drastic, but you recover in a different way. I guess the main learning from Heartbleed, and we had to apparently relearn it in Log4j, is that open source security is a supply chain problem. Open source is supply for our environments. Pretty much every software project anywhere relies on open source, and it seems like common libraries like OpenSSL and curl, you'll find them from every single project. And when Heartbleed was found, surprisingly found exactly at the same time in two different places. I know the group which found it in the University of Oulu. That really opened up our eyes on the sorry state of auditing open source code. And I guess the best anecdote on that particular vulnerability was that the commit which introduced the bug in OpenSSL, which caused Heartbleed, was done by a single developer on New Year's Eve at 10 p.m. in the evening. And the question is, who the hell writes SSL libraries at 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve? And the answer is these guys. Like that's the kind of people who write the infrastructure that runs the societies around us, and we rely on them wholeheartedly, and nobody double checks what they write, and we just use it everywhere. Like there were tons of cars running Heartbleed vulnerable code. Log4j hit Teslas.
Log4j, right? Yeah. Tesla's running.
Yeah, so it's everywhere, and it really is responsibility of the companies that use this open source material to spend resources, people, man hours, and money to audit the code they use.
But do you think it's only code auditing, or isn't the responsibility of the companies using it? I mean, that goes very deep. I mean, there are packages depending on packages, depending on packages, depending on packages. But shouldn't you like really see what you rely on and then maybe sponsor the whole stuff you're using? Because I mean, typically the curve for open source, from my perspective, is stuff gets very prominent. Like Ruby on Rails got very prominent at first, and then kind of it shortly kind of fell. And then at a certain point, there was no one really taking care of that anymore. And people like kind of had real jobs. Maybe they got paid for. Isn't that like something we have to solve as also community of open source developers?
Sure. It's not just auditing. And when I said auditing, I didn't mean just look through the code and be happy. Auditing in the sense of like committing people to work with the project long term to make sure the code quality is better. And of course, it doesn't have to be auditing. It can be active participation in developing the code base to be better and more secure. Nevertheless, for companies, especially the companies that have the resources, that have the budgets to take their responsibility for the projects they use. And I have to be clear here. It's not like this isn't happening. This is happening. We've seen the wake-up calls. But apparently we needed another wake-up call, which was Log4j.
And we have wake-up calls like almost every month right now, right? I mean, recently there was like a breach at Heroku, right?
Sure.
Can you tell us about that?
I didn't actually follow that one so closely, and I think a better example on the kind of issues we also have to worry about regarding supply chain security when we speak about open source as a supply chain issue is what happened with sabotaged containers and sabotaged open source code bases, especially during the Ukraine war. People were actively changing their code to retaliate on Russian users, for example, or similar cases where people were modifying the code to send a political message. And this is it's also an interesting question. Like, are we supposed to be okay with political use of code like this? I'm not really sure what the right answer is.
So you mean like the cases we saw that like the Russian TV, for example, was modified, or the Russian?
No, there were a couple of people who were had really popular libraries who self-sabotaged their own code.
Self-sabotage.
So
okay.
it would do destructive things when it was executed in Russia, for example. So tried to send a statement about the war to Russia by using their code and their visibility, the code being popular as a transportation mechanism for the message, which is understandable, but it's problematic.
In a way, it is. I mean, at the beginning of the war, I thought, okay, why can't RIPE just shut down IPv4 there, right? Something like that.
Sure.
Like, what do you think? Like, if this would have happened, and it didn't happen, but if this would have happened, like, what would be the answer then? Like, is it dangerous from your perspective, or?
Okay, the discussion around RUNET or RUNET has been very interesting. RUNET is the intranet of Russia. This is the project they've been speaking about for 2 years now, that they claim they can disconnect Russia from the rest of the internet. And they claimed in July 2021 that they tested this successfully. And the funny thing is, we were watching network topology and BGP routing and core routers of the internet when they claimed they did it, and we didn't see anything happen. So I don't think they did anything. I think this is an information operation. They're claiming they have the capability of disconnecting from the internet and being independent, and I don't think they can do it. I don't think they've tested it. I don't think they want to do it. And then we have the other side of the discussion. Okay, should we do it? If they're not going to disconnect themselves as a way of sanctioning Russia because of the aggressive war on Ukraine, could the rest of the world shut down Russia and remove it from the internet? And the answer is we could. Definitely we could. We could even reroute the internal traffic inside Russia to a black hole for large amounts. They don't have root servers. They don't have CAs. We could shut down all of that. We could shut down routing for Russian or RU addresses. We could remove them from the DNS. But I don't think we should. And I'm not a fan of Russia by any means. I live in Helsinki. I mean, we've had problematic neighbor for decades. But when we think about the Russian people, like one of the very few things left that will be able to provide them with balanced, independent, neutral information is through the internet. And if we cut them off, that's one of the few things we have left for communicating and getting the real information out. And in fact, in my book, any development anywhere which turns internet into disconnected islands is bad development. You see, internet is one of the very few things that we have which is really and truly global. It really has been internet in all meanings of the word. And that's why it's flourished, and that's why it's been so great and problematic at the same time. But any development which would take away the global nature of the internet, I think would be a bad development.
But wouldn't it just be smarter? Wouldn't we just be smarter than them if we like turn off, I don't know, the wrong news sources from our perspective? It wouldn't be legitimate, but in a way, it would be way smarter than cutting them off from the financial system. If we cut them off from the internet, I mean, it's like the financial system also depends on the internet. So you could, I don't know, kill RT.com and stuff like that.
Right.
And
people are trying. There's plenty of Western hackers, Ukrainian hackers, hobbyist hackers, civilians around the world trying to do that. It's easier said than done, but we've seen more cyber activity during this war than ever before in any other conflict. And I want to be clear here. I don't want to overemphasize or exaggerate the importance of cyber in the Ukrainian war because it is a very real war full of very real deaths and very real tragedies. And cyber is important, but it's not the most important part. When cruise missiles are hitting apartment buildings, it's kind of hard to take all this cyber stuff as seriously as we otherwise would.
Yeah, but maybe that would be hackable as well, right? I don't know. I mean, I just had the Raspberry Pi founder here in the podcast, and I could imagine that in some missiles, there's actually like a tiny Raspberry Pi just steering the way through to Ukraine. So
yeah, although it's kind of hard probably to find a way to connect to it. But of course, all the weapons are being controlled by computers, no doubt about that. That is very true. But they are not online in the sense that you could easily find a way and hack them. However, I did read a very interesting tech paper maybe 2 years ago about what was it? Not buffer overflow, but stack leak in a military system, which someone was investigating and reporting, and turns out that it was there was a memory leak in a missile control system, which they decided not to do anything about because it was in a missile, and when the missile hits the target, it doesn't matter that it has leaked memory. It's like a garbage collection by hitting a target. It doesn't matter that there's been like it's shortly but surely running out of memory, but it's not going to run out of memory before it hits the target. That's not the way we think about coding typically. Like typically, if you have a memory or memory leak, you want to fix it because it's going to be a problematic eventually. Here, it doesn't matter. Yeah, very short lifetime for a system like that. Too short lifetime.
Yeah, you can imagine. But I mean, in the future, like what you write in your book, if it's smart, it's vulnerable. That will also apply to weapons, right? I mean, that right now doesn't really. I mean, if you look at all the tanks, it kind of looks horribly old from my perspective. But I mean, 20 years from now, it will also apply to those, right?
I think you're exactly on the money here. If someone would have told us 30 years ago, when in the beginning of the web revolution, 1992, very first websites start to appear around 1992. 1994 is when the big revolution really started. Someone would have told us back then that, eventually every single factory will be connected to the internet. We would have laughed. Like, of course they won't. That would be really dangerous, really insecure. Why on earth would you connect factories to internet? And of course, today, every factory is on the internet. And today, exactly in the same way, we shake our heads on the idea of weapons systems being on the internet. And they will be on the internet. Everything will be on the internet.
Obviously, I mean, 5G is kind of 2 years away from us. So, I mean, your watch is potentially connected. I mean, yours isn't, but I have an Apple Watch and it's connected to the internet and has like a 3G connection. So this will most likely happen. And
that's right.
Isn't that then, I mean, ideally, I mean, if you think about weapons and like people really running against each other and shooting each other, it's kind of stupid, right? It really feels
it's kind of stupid. I agree.
Yeah. And would that lead to then just people fighting each other using cyber weapons at a certain point, using laptops at a certain point?
No, it won't. Unfortunately not. I would prefer cyber war over other types of war. Less people die in cyber war. The problem is cyber war is not a thing by itself. Cyber is a new domain for fighting wars. Technology has always shaped the way we fight our wars, the way we handle our conflicts. 500 years ago, the best technology we had was swords. So we fought our wars with swords until we got good enough technology to build warships. So land war expanded into sea war, but the innovation of sea war did not make land war go away. We just fought in both. Then we got planes, so air war, satellites and shit, so space war, and now cyberspace war. And if you look at modern conflicts like Ukraine, they are fighting in all of them: land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. And the interesting thing about this is that these 5 domains today is not a full list. It will be longer. There will be a 6th domain and seventh domain for war. We just don't know what they are yet. But I can guarantee to you that whatever they will sound like science fiction today. So I don't know what the sixth domain will be, but let's say it's going to be nano warfare. And you could imagine the enemy distributing airborne micro robots, which would infiltrate the bloodstream of enemy soldiers and go to their brains and modify their thoughts. And if that sounds like science fiction to you, well, exactly. That's how science fiction like cyber war sounded like 30 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, we're on the other end thinking about brain implants, and whenever there are brain implants, then you most likely can also modify that, right? And it most likely has a 3G chip. So I think it's not. I mean, it really sounds like bad fiction, but it's kind of like, isn't that like the path to that all happening?
Right. But nevertheless, the point is that we are unlikely to see just a cyber war between two countries. It's always going to be a war, and it's going to be fought in multiple domains, including cyber, at the same time. When you look at Russia versus Ukraine again, I mean, how many people are actually there using VPNs and trying to escape all of that and trying to escape the information bubble that they have in their country? Like, how would you see that? How many smart, educated hackers are there in Russia that try to fight against what is happening there? Oh, they definitely do exist. I can't give you numbers, but I have been in touch with people, Russian hackers, Russian coders, who don't support the war, who do what they can from within. But it's hard when you're living inside such a bubble where the majority of the opinion is different from you and they don't believe the truth.
Yeah.
They don't believe what's really happening in Ukraine. And during this war, I've been in touch a lot with the with people in Ukraine, with the IT army members and with technical people over there. And I've been surprised by many of the details. For example, one detail was that when I was speaking to a group of IT army people who were like daytime working as a developer, and then evening time fighting Russians online and launching attacks against Russian infrastructure. Big part of them were women. And I was like, well, I was surprised. And they were like, well, what do you think? All the men are in the battlefield. So like, are you stupid? And I was like, well, yeah, actually, now that you say it, that's pretty obvious. I just didn't think about it beforehand. And also, one thing which I found interesting is that these Ukrainians who are fighting Russians online, many of them have felt the need to emphasize to me that they are not criminals, they're not bad people, and that they are not breaking any laws. That, during peacetime, it's illegal to shoot people. During wartime, it's okay, as long as you shoot your enemy. During peacetime, it's illegal to break into services and hack services. During wartime, it's okay, as long as it's your enemy. That's what they were telling to me. And of course, that's the way it works. It's just interesting that these people felt that they have to explain that. They wanted to tell to me that they're not bad people. They're not criminals. They're just trying to defend their homeland. And I understand that very well.
Yeah, it's so strange, right? I mean, if you think about cyber, that like differs a lot from like really the fact that there are like people shooting each others and really killing each others and taking photos of that and twittering that. So that's really, really ridiculous from my perspective. But like one guy I had to think about when the war first started, and I honestly, I remember myself like checking his Twitter profile like 10 times in a row, was obviously Ed Snowden. So I just thought, okay, I don't want to be in this man's skin. Like, right. I didn't want that before, but like, what do you think? Like, what is he doing? I don't know if you're in touch with him or...
I'm not, but I'm sure he's kicking himself over and over again for getting stuck in, of all the countries, in Russia. That's not where he wanted to end in. In fact, at the time when he was leaving Hong Kong and trying to escape, everybody thought he was on his way to Iceland because he had very good connections in Iceland and felt that Iceland could protect him. And the most logical route from Hong Kong, where he was, to Iceland is actually not through Russia. It's actually through Helsinki, Finland, because Finnair has a direct flight to both. And of course, the reason why he got stuck in Moscow was that his passport was invalidated by US government while he was on air. So if he would have had the same experience while he would have been rerouted or routed through Iceland, through Finland, I wonder if he would still be in Helsinki, or if Finland would have been able to protect him in Helsinki, as well as, I mean,
I guess he would have just been delivered then, right? I mean,
maybe we'll never know, but I don't think he wanted to be in Moscow, but I don't think he has a choice.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't Twitter for a while, and he was quite active before, and I don't know what he's doing right now, but I mean, what kind of a life is it there? I mean, he sometimes has appearances on conferences, like online appearances and so on. Like, is he living like a normal life there? Do you know that?
I don't really know, and I don't want to speculate on that. But he's in a difficult position, especially now during the war. Especially when you can't publicly say that it's a war, and obviously it is a war.
And like coming back to your future development, so how will the role of AI and machine learning be in cybersecurity? I mean, is that maybe like the next step then? Like before we go to those drones that kind of infect your nervous system and so on? That's
a different development. Yes, AI clearly will be the next big step for the attackers. For the defenders, this is ancient history. In fact, at our company, at WithSecure, we started developing machine learning-based defenses in 2005. That's goddamn 17 years ago. That's forever ago. And all this time, 17 years, we've been waiting for the attackers to start to use these technologies, and they still haven't today, but they will. And the main reason why it's going to happen in the near future is that we have wealthier and wealthier cybercrime gangs. They're already hiring lawyers and business analysts and running fake security companies to hire remote pen testers to work for cybersecurity companies, which really are cyber criminals. So it's clear that they are on the verge of being able to hire enough ML AI people to work for them. And then we will start seeing malware which will rewrite its own code and modify its functionality, and phishing attacks which will learn what works and what doesn't and modify on the fly. All of that is going to happen. It's going to happen in the near future. But then we'll see how well the machine learning systems built by security companies like ours, how good will they actually fare against bad AI? Then we will have good AI against bad AI.
When you talk about those mechanisms, is it like mostly pattern detection and stuff like that, log files, or?
It's mostly handling the large amounts of samples, large amounts of attacks, large amounts of vulnerabilities and bugs that have to be handled, and running the automated honeypots and honeypots which collect all these samples. There's simply too much stuff to be handled by humans, so it has to be handled by machines. And this applies both to consumer security products as well as to enterprise and corporate security products. And I have to mention here, as we're speaking, that last time we spoke, I was working for WithSecure. Nowadays, I'm working for WithSecure because the company is splitting into two different companies. So to consumer business,
F and With,
yeah, consumer business is going to be F-Secure, and enterprise business is going to be WithSecure. So effectively, what we're doing is we're taking the biggest cybersecurity company in the Nordics and splitting it into the biggest and the second biggest cybersecurity company in the Nordics.
Yeah, I guess like your part is then the let's say more interesting part, like with the companies, like business wise, it's maybe the better thing. And
I don't know, but I will be with the enterprise side. It's going to be the bigger of the two sides.
Yeah. Okay, understood. One thing where we can actually see AI being applied in attacks, so-called attacks, is phishing, right? Mm-hmm. When like GPT-3, it kind of made it very accessible that like everyone can use GPT-3 these days, or almost everyone. Mm-hmm. And that leads to emails being sent that just look as like they were real from, I don't know, an email from your boss that, who sends you like a very, very like tonality-wise, very natural language written email to send him money and stuff like that. And you think that will even become more or smarter with GPT-3 entering and all of that?
These natural language processing systems are amazing. I've been playing with GPT-3 for more than a year, and I'm always amazed, especially about the fact that it works in any language. Any language I can speak, it can speak, including all the funky dialects, including programming languages. So it really is.
Yeah, that's really crazy, right?
Really versatile and scary at the same time. Powerful and scary. That's the way we like it. Now, the thing that saves us for now from the worst attacks that can be used with automated natural language generation is that you cannot download GPT-3. It's only available as a service which you use through their cloud, which means they can monitor and detect malicious use. They can kick you out. If you start sending out millions of phishing emails, they will stop it. And that's going to save us for now. And the official reason, I don't know if it's official, but the explanation why you can't download GPT-3 is not just that they want to control it. It's the fact that it's too damn large. The corpus is huge. Just the index is supposed to be like petabytes or whatever. So it's undownloadable. They don't can be used remotely.
But these days, I mean, offline use of AI also got more powerful and compact, right? I mean, I don't know if a Siri, something like that, already works offline partly.
I think
and such
does,
models.
Yeah. To some length it does, yes. At least the language detection part does work. It can tell you the time of the day without being online, so yes, it does. So yeah, obviously that's not going to save us forever, and I'm not really sure what the long-term solution for this will be. Just like generation of GAN images clearly brought us new problems where you can now make tons of realistic-looking humans who are not real.
Yeah. I just wrote down deepfakes when you were talking. Like, what do you think about that? Like,
well, I know the guy who runs the team that developed this technology. It's NVIDIA technology, made in Finland, by mostly old demo scene hackers.
Yeah, I know. I once saw a video of a guy, like he really looked a bit nerdy, and he was from Finland.
Yeah, it's those guys, like old demo scene hackers. As the same gang is always behind interesting developments, whether it's GANs or I don't know, new rendering technologies. In fact, some of the reader or listeners might remember Future Crew and Second Reality. Two of the guys who did the graphics for that actually ended up working for Qualcomm, and many of the listeners carry Qualcomm chips designed by these demoscene hackers in their pockets right now, which is quite remarkable. I actually mentioned this story in my book, so it's interesting to see how these really long-term trends come back, and we will see them over and over again. But yeah, these algorithms which get better and better because they guide each other. Like in GAN, you have like competing algorithms shooting each other down, and you end up with something which looks convincingly real. It's exciting and scary at the same time.
But aren't there also algorithms, AI, that can detect such deepfakes easily?
Yes, for now, and it's going to be a massive game of cat and mouse.
It's again like a cat and mouse game, like everything in life, right?
Everything in life, and everything in online crime, everything that's bad online, everything we try to fight, it's a game of cat and mouse, and it's not going to be over anytime soon. And the good news in that is that there's job security in security.
Yeah. Obviously, that's a good thing for you. And yeah, the question for now is like, which country is the cat and which is the mouse, right? It's like also being fought on the country level. So, I mean, the US kind of like, as we all know, since Edward Snowden is like kind of far ahead, I guess.
Yes,
what do you think about Europe? Is there like any positive picture you can draw on Europe when it comes to cybersecurity?
Oh, well, by far, the best country in Europe to defend its networks and its systems against governmental attacks is Ukraine. And that's almost surprising because it's a poor country. Their GDP is like 1/5 of Finland's GDP. They have tons of old legacy systems. So why are they so good? And the answer is all the other countries, Germany, Finland, UK, France, have been building their defenses and rehearsing against theoretical attacks, running tabletop exercises and war games. And Ukraine has done none of that. They've been fighting real Russian attacks for 8 years, over and over and over again. And the end result is that they're getting really good at detecting and stopping them. So, for example, during this war now, Russians have tried, again, cutting the power in Ukraine and failed. So they are able to fight against these attacks that Russians are capable of doing. So Russia is failing. They're surprisingly weak in both their real-world attacks and their online attacks when they fight against Ukraine.
Interesting. I thought they are like a bit more advanced there, to be honest. And I actually thought that like potentially Estonia is very advanced.
Estonia is good.
Potentially.
It's good. I would of course rank it high. Not the highest, but very high. And the reason why I think Estonia is so good, well, the most important reason is leadership. But what really helped them to get where they are today is that they had no legacy.
Yeah,
they got independent in the 1990s.
Yeah.
They kicked out all the old technology made by Russians and started from scratch, already from the internet age. And I remember, I know the previous president of Estonia, Mr. Thomas Ilves, personally, met him last week. And I've always been impressed about his level of technical knowledge. The first time I saw him speak as a president in a presidential meeting, he was speaking about like DNS-based DDoS reflection attacks. And he's a goddamn president. So,
really?
Yes, really. So impressive level of technical knowledge. And that's what defines the leaders in Estonia today as well. It's a small country, so it's agile, and they have no legacy. So it's a little bit unfair.
Yeah, sounds a little bit unfair if I compare to Germany. I mean, fingers crossed. So we shortly have to come to the end. So if you could, as our listeners are CTOs, if you could like shout out a few ideas to CTOs, what you would recommend to them. Living in this like crazy time of ransom and so on, what would it be?
Well, think through your threat assessments. Think through who you really are. What does your company do? Who do you really need to worry about? Like, who would like to hurt you? Who would like to steal from you? Are you in a position where your competitors are trying to spy on you? Are you a valid military target for during times of conflict and war? Are you a defense contractor? And the answers to these questions are different for different organizations. And it also defines what kind of enemies, what kind of attackers do you have to worry about. And that means that then you can start putting your limited resources and your limited budgets into the right place. There's no point in building defenses against governmental attackers if you are running a chain of pizza restaurants. You're never going to become a target of foreign spies or foreign militaries, but you do have to worry about criminals who want to steal your money, your credit card systems, your payment, your payroll. So put your money and your resources into the right place.
Okay, the last time, like my closing question is like typically the time machine question, like what would you do if you would see yourself like 15 years ago? And I asked you that question and you gave the most impressive answer I ever got. You would not whisper anything into your young self's ears. You would just be, because you're just happy with what you do, which I really liked. But if you could now just go like 3 years back.
Oh, 3 years back, before the pandemic.
Yes.
What would I do? I wouldn't need to buy a summer cottage, which would be good advice otherwise, because I live on a place which is pretty much like a summer cottage, basically off the grid and in a safe, distant place.
So don't buy summer cottage?
I'm not really sure what I would tell. You got me there. I don't have a good answer for you. I'm sure I'll come up with a great answer right after we stop recording.
Okay, then you have to email me that. Yeah. Your last one was quite impressive. But,
yes.
So thanks a lot, Mikko.
Thank you
for
very
being
much.
Here. And I hope you don't hack into our smart devices we have here at the conference.
No. I won't. It's great to be here at OMAR after all this time being disconnected or speaking to the cold eye of the camera. It's great to be in a real world event with tens of thousands of people and speaking to real people. So I love it here.
Yeah. As I said yesterday, like my big learning in the last 6 months, or my biggest learning was actually yesterday when I realized that reality beats fiction by far. That's like really what you feel here again, right?
And I just got a good answer to what would I whisper to myself 3 years ago. Rent a Donkey Kong. I have a friend who rents old arcade machines. And in the beginning of the pandemic, when I realized we're going to be stuck in home, I want to rent a Donkey Kong because I want to make a new high score in Donkey Kong, the 1981 Nintendo coin. And then it's going to be over soon. I don't want to do the hassle and move it around. Of course, if it lasted so long, I should have done it, but I didn't. So that's the advice. Mikko, rent a Donkey Kong right now.
Did you rent one now, or?
No, the pandemic is now over. I'm not going to rent it anymore.
Let's hope for that. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mikko, for being here, and hope to see you soon again.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the AlphaList podcast. If you like this episode, share it with friends. I'm sure they love it too. Make sure to subscribe so you can hear deep insights into technical leadership and technology trends as they become available. Also, please tell us if there is a topic you would like to hear more about or a technical leader whose brain you would like us to pick. AlphaList is all about helping CTOs getting access to the insights they need to make the best decisions for their company. Please send us suggestions to cto@alphalist.com. Send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter. After all, the more knowledge we bring to CTOs, the more growth we see in tech. Or, as we say on AlphaList, accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth. See you in the next episode.